Hi, I'm Kathleen Estes from Life.Family Media, and we're so glad you've joined us for this series on faith, family, and infertility. We know that God is the giver of life, and He's the one that writes our stories. For my husband and I, we built our family through adoption, but we know that there are so many different ways that God loves to build families. We want to share some of those stories to inspire you.
Hi, I'm Randy Phillips, lead pastor of Life Family, and this is Life Family Media, and we're doing a series called Faith, Family, and Infertility. Infertility. You know, as a pastor, I was not prepared for the subject of infertility, and I found it to be one of the great sadness of people's hearts. I am joined today by the amazing Kathleen Estes.
Thank
Hello,
you.
Kathleen.
Hi.
You are a five-talent lady.
Thank you.
You are the creative arts director for Life Family. You're the worship leader for Life Family. You are a vocalist. You are a writer. You're an actress. Is there nothing you can't do?
Have a baby, apparently.
Let's talk about that because as a younger man, as a boy, I just thought, you know, along the natural paths of development and marriage, as a kid, I just thought, well, what is the... I didn't know anyone that struggled with this. There was no family members. It just didn't seem to be either talked about or no one wanted to talk about it. When did you know, at what point did you know there are some challenges with having a child?
You know, it's interesting because being raised in a faith environment, it took a while to accept that there might be an issue because I was taught to trust God's timing's perfect.
Yes.
And trying to do everything according to how God instructs us to live our lives. My life had been so incredibly blessed. And I didn't have any areas of great sorrow that I had walked through up until that point. I had saved myself for marriage and, you know, so did my husband. And so we just thought, you know, we were just walking in the favor and the blessing of the Lord in all things.
Yeah.
And so when we first got married, having children wasn't a desire like to right away start a family. And about year 3 was when I just felt like I started seeing babies everywhere. And it was like something was turning and changing inside of me that I wanted to be a mom. And so we started to try to have children and life kind of took over as far as feeling called into full-time ministry. And we both left our careers, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, this is why we don't have kids yet. Because this required such great faith that if we were trying to provide for a family, we wouldn't have stepped out in this moment. We had moved to New York and we were a part of a church plant, and we had so many spiritual kids that once again, it just felt like life was so full. It was a desire, but it didn't get the attention that it was like, we've got to do something about this because it's not just happening naturally. We moved to Philadelphia and we were planning a church there, and a lady in our church was working with the University of Penn for an IVF study, and they were looking for couples to be a part of it. So that's how we got involved with even looking into what our issues were, and basically it was unexplained infertility. And so we went from doing nothing to like bringing out the big guns. You know, here we're doing a round of IVF, and I just felt so like, look how God set this all up. And so we did. I got pregnant, and it just, you know, everybody's celebrating with you. We were very open about our journey, and at about 12 weeks, I miscarried. And we were scheduled to go be at a worship conference the next day, and it was like just everything dropped out from underneath us. And I remember my husband being like, look, I'll let everybody know we can't go. And I was just like, no, I want to go. I want to be surrounded with people. I don't want to sit here and just think about this loss. And that experience just solidified so much how much God loved me. Like he just spoke to me in that atmosphere, and how my weeping was even worship to him that day.
Yes.
We were singing a song that I'd sung 1,000 times, Lord, You Are Good.
Yeah.
And the lyrics just took on this weight and this depth that I'm going through something that hurts and is painful, and yet my God is still good, and I know that. And so that was, it definitely strengthened my faith as opposed to making me angry with God. I ran to him, and I think that was because he set it up in a way where I was surrounded with other people. And I think it's helped me. I would not choose to go through it, but I think it's helped me to understand what other couples are walking through. And I'm grateful for that.
Yes.
I'm grateful for that.
Worshiping through your pain. My goodness. The pressure to have a child from parents that want a grandchild, as I put on my daughters. Give me a grandchild.
Yeah.
The pressure from other married couples, the pressure. And what culture says is supposed to happen, and that there's a stigma attached to if it doesn't.
Right.
And it didn't for you.
Yeah.
How did you experience that pressure from other people?
Most days fine. There's a lot of shame involved with it, because you're asking yourself, what's wrong with me?
Okay.
And you're wondering, is there something else God's requiring of me?
Yes.
And when you look in the Bible, you see that there were a lot of women that struggled with being barren. But somehow, especially, this is years ago now, it wasn't talked about as much in the church as an issue. And, the first commandment, be fruitful and multiply. You can't do the very basic thing that you feel that God's told us to do. And yet I recognize that there is a war against righteous seed. I think going to the grocery store and just magazines of all these different people, living wild lives that are now pregnant, just had twins. And you're like, God, why?
Yes.
Why can't we have a child? And I still don't understand.
No.
But yet God definitely gave us a heart for adoption. And it was in there, but I wanted to have a biological child first.
Right.
I didn't want to create an Ishmael, so to speak.
Yes.
So I didn't want to feel like I was forcing God's hand by, I'm going to take this on my own. And so I didn't start with us pursuing adoption. It was like, I felt like I had my way it was going to work out. And first it was going to be a biological child, and then we were going to adopt. And obviously God had a different plan for us. And so part of it was surrendering to that, and just having to smile as people are like, oh, you don't want kids? Or, well, you need to be confessing these verses, or you need to do this detox diet, or, you would be amazed at some of the things that people would suggest that you do in this process. And then everybody else is like, you just have to relax. That's all. You just have to relax. So it was crazy.
Phillips, Craig, and Dean music.
Yes.
That's always there was a lady that came up to our table one time.
Oh, no.
I probably should say
I'm nervous. No, please. Now you've started.
Lord, forgive me. She said, you know what, I'm not going to tell. She said, okay, I'm going to tell. We conceived our child.
Listening to you.
Yep. And I was so embarrassed, I just didn't know what to say. But I wanted to say later, like, what song? What particular song was it? But,
oh, Lord.
All right.
Okay,
I'm so embarrassed now. Okay. How did the church help you or hurt you during this journey?
I definitely felt support from the people around us in the church. There was definitely a lot of prayer. That was wonderful. But like I said, there were a lot of people that thought they had the answer for us. And I think now I'm very careful. God chose the path of adoption for us to build our family, and I love it. But I have some friends that walked that path and then think everyone is supposed to adopt.
Yep.
Or, people that have done foster care, or people that have chosen IVF. And I just think everyone has their own story God's writing. And so I'm very cautious to just, what does God put in your heart?
Yep.
And stand with the person in faith for what that is. So I think it's, someone coming up to you and saying, well, be it unto you according to your faith. Obviously, you don't have enough faith, and that's hurtful.
Very hurtful.
When you're unable to
Yep.
force something to happen. You have to trust God, and yet at the same time, don't let that block you from bringing other people into your circle to pray with you and stand with you in faith.
What you went through during that journey is your heart was bruised. You're trying to figure it out. Where is God in this? What was David's journey? I love your husband, David. He's such a righteous man.
He is.
What was his journey like?
It's interesting because you often think about what the female journey is like through this, because obviously we're the ones that are carrying the child. For David, he was incredibly supportive. And he obviously was going through his own journey, but doing IVF, you're pumping your body full of hormones. We all know female hormones makes us a little crazy at times. So he was very gracious. And I think he would give me my shots, because I wanted it to be that we were walking through this together. So we definitely made it very intentional. And we did have like a confession sheet of Bible verses that we were standing on. I believe in confessing the Word of God. And so we, every morning, after we'd have our own private quiet time, we'd come together and we would declare those verses back and forth to each other, because there were days where he was having a good day full of faith and I was struggling, or there was days, I was, all right, God's got this, and he was struggling. So there definitely was a great partnership with him. And I think like I said, both of us, I think, had to get over the shame that can be associated with infertility.
Bless him for supporting you. What is it about God closing the womb? I've read that so many times, Old Testament, whether it was Sarah or whether it was Elizabeth or whether it was Hannah. So many. Yeah. It just says God closed the womb. What is that about? You walked it. What is God up to there? In your opinion?
I don't pretend to know. I mean, I think the verse that talks about his ways are higher than ours, I had to embrace that, especially after our miscarriage. And we adopted 2 incredible boys.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a minute.
And I think about their destiny, and I recognize they would probably not be my sons if I had had the biological child at that moment. Right. And so I trust that God's ways truly are higher. And while I don't understand it, and I do think part of it is a spiritual battle, I think we embrace with faith every moment, because adopting took a lot of faith too.
Yes. The Old Testament culture, that was just horrific. If you didn't produce a child, you were cursed.
Right.
They looked at you as cursed. That was an unbearable thing for women of that of the Old Testament time. But even today, even as much as we've evolved as a culture, and there still is a little bit of that, isn't it? 'Cause I was eating with a couple the other day, and I said, "How long y'all been married?" They said, 13 years or 15 years, I can't remember. And the very next word out of my mouth, I couldn't stop it. Why don't you have children? Is that just automatic in us to ask that question?
There's always a question. It's like when we're young, it's what are you going to be when you grow up? Then, you grow up, well, when are you getting married? And then as soon as you get married, when are you having kids?
Yes.
So I feel like every phase of life, we're always pushing for that next,
Yes.
no matter what season we're in. And there are certain questions that obviously are much more painful, like if you can't have a child, answering that, why don't you guys have kids yet? Or don't you guys want kids? Like, it's a very private
It is.
thing, whether it's a choice that you chose not to or whether there's complications.
So in helping a dummy like me, when you recognize in a couple that there's some challenges, there could be some challenges, what is a better way to, when they say, I've been married 13, 15 years, whatever it is, we don't have children, what is a better way of what are my next best words?
I never minded someone said, oh, do you guys have kids? Because that's like a more yes or no question.
Okay.
And then I think it's up to the couple if they want to bring you into wherever they're at in that journey.
Okay. Got it. Note to self. I'm going to do better. The journey to adoption. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
We had, it had been about 6 months since the miscarriage, and we were having our quiet time on our little patio in Philly. And David came across the verse that morning of children are an inheritance from the Lord. And he was just like, Kathleen, I've got to read this out to you today. I just feel faith on it. And I honestly was just kind of, thank you for that. Like, I wasn't there. I felt like I had needed a break from trying to do everything that I thought maybe I needed to be doing. And so we were both in that mode, but he just felt faith that morning. And I got up and I went in and I started checking email. And I had an email that the title was, We Need a Home. And I clicked on it. And it was a friend of mine who had gone to Ethiopia. And she was with her sister who was adopting an infant. And she saw all the children in the waiting program, because once a child is past 2, it's much harder for them to be adopted. And so she was a photographer. She took pictures of all the kids.
Yeah.
And she just sent out this mass email. So it was all these kids in this picture. And when I saw the picture of these 2 little boys, I just lost it crying. It was like in that moment, they captured my heart.
Yeah.
And so David came in and, what's wrong? Because I'm just bawling, sitting up. He thought someone died or, what's going on? And I was like, these kids need a home. I could hardly get the words out. And he looked at the email and pointed to their picture and said, find out what it would take to get them. And I was like, kind of looked at him like, don't mess with me. Like, are you serious? And he was like, no, I'm serious. Call. Let's find out what it would take. And from that day, it was 6 months. We hadn't done anything. We hadn't done a home study, nothing. So we had a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But from that day, it was 6 months till we were on a plane with my best friend in Nashville, who had gotten the same email that, thank God, had chosen a different child. And our families got to go together to pick up our children, which 6 months is unheard of
6
for
months.
an adoption, never mind an international adoption. Yeah.
So what was it like when you saw them in person?
Oh, you have all this love and you just want to attack them with it. And you have to be so careful because they're looking at you like, who are you, lady? And so it took a lot of restraint, honestly, to embrace them, to smile, to try to win their affection. Because to them, I was a stranger. To me, I had stared at their picture.
Yeah.
I had imagined their personalities and couldn't wait to just wrap them up in my arms. And so it really did take a lot of restraint, but it was overwhelming joy at the same time.
And what about for David?
Oh, they definitely responded to him quicker.
Really?
Like the dad, the wrestle, the run on in his arms. Like it was a longer process for me to win that with them. But for them, they loved having a guy there to pick them up and hold them and tickle them. And
was it important for you to know their story, their background, their history, whether they had a dad, a mom? in one house, or whether they were, what brought them to be offered up for adoption? Is that the way to say it?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. We were originally under the impression that they were full orphans, which somehow felt more noble.
Yeah.
We did find out in the process that their dad had passed away.
Okay.
Their mom was still alive. She's the one that relinquished them, and they did have older siblings. And so that was hard on my heart. Because there's that part of you that wants to see them reconciled and apart. And so it took a while for me to fully understand the desperation that their mom felt, that she could not provide for them anymore. And that the faith that it took that someone else could give them the life that she wanted them to be living.
Yes.
And thankfully, they came from a Christian environment. The adoption agency and the orphanage in Ethiopia is a strong Christian place. There, when they speak of that place, it's the house with all the kids. Like it wasn't a horrible situation like you hear in some. We've since connected with the family. We do send updates. We've tried to do some Skype and FaceTime. They're in this little village in Waleta, and they don't have great internet.
Yeah.
It's been our heart's desire to take the boys back and visit.
Really?
And life.
Did they ever ask about it?
They very much have embraced that they're an American, and they do now, but it took a while. At first, we were eating Ethiopian food all the time, and listening to that music. And I remember the first birthday that my youngest said, "I don't want Ethiopian. I want chicken wings." And I was like, "Okay," it was a cute moment, and they definitely, they are American citizens. We went through that process as well, and they love American football, and
yes, they do.
They're definitely embracing the culture here while honoring their culture back home. And it is a desire of our family and their hearts to go back and visit.
So you had these. How old were the two boys when you got them?
They were 3.5 and 6.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you did you ever say to yourself, "What have I done?"
Yes. And that's a very honest answer, but there was, David and I never articulated to each other, but you go 15 years of marriage with no kids, not even a dog. So you're just doing what you want when you want, And it was, I think one morning, they don't speak English. We just got back from another time zone. And we woke up to noise, and there were these two little boys standing at the end of the bed looking at us, what's going on here? And I tried to homeschool. That's not my gift. You were asking me, what can't you do? Homeschool.
Yep.
But I was overwhelmed because they didn't speak English as well. It wasn't like I was just trying to homeschool. We were trying to embrace the language. And thankfully, we had wise voices in our lives that said, if you'll get them in school, peers will help them learn the language even better than you will. And so it took a while to find that rhythm. And several friends of mine said, this is just like when you bring a baby home from the hospital. You're not sleeping at night. They can't tell you what they need or what they want. So I kind of got a similar experience, but just in a very different way.
I love your boys.
Thank you.
They're precious. You and David are white.
We are.
Very white.
Yes.
Your boys are not. Mm-hmm. What, when you go into a restaurant, a movie, a concert or whatever, what kind of looks do you get? What kind of comments have you heard?
We have really been blessed and graced. There was one time when the boys were really little, we went to a restaurant and the waiter came up and said, "Where are y'all adopted from?"
Oh.
And the boys, without missing a beat, turned and went, China? Right? And the waitress is like really confused, like, what?
China.
And so she walked away. David and I are just dying laughing. And my little one looks at us and goes, did you tell her we were adopted? How did she know? And it was just that innocence that's so precious. For me, in school, when they started to have to learn the history of our nation, it broke my heart because I wanted them to not know the dark parts of history.
Right.
But, it is a part of history, and it's important so that we learn from it. And, the last couple of years, obviously, there's been a lot of tension in our nation and in our world. And I love that our family is a representation of Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream,
It is.
And I'm proud that we're a mixed family in that way. And like I said, we have been really blessed, and we have good conversations.
Good.
And I feel that it's a gift that it's expanded our world.
In pastoring, there's been a number of people who have adopted, and generally it's international, although some here, but they wanted children, but they also wanted a postcard, a Christmas card,
right?
That Instagram, like. But I knew that behind the scenes, they're mixing cultures. They're mixing of just different ways of seeing life. And it was many times heartbreaking.
Yeah.
What was the biggest adjustment you and David had to have with two boys from different cultures, different lives, different worlds?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think our hearts with the kingdom of God was always that it was diverse. And our church was very diverse. At the time that we adopted, we had just been in New York City. We were living in Philly. And so our closest friends, our family, the people we were doing life with was very diverse. And so for me, it took being humble enough to say to one of my friends, I don't know how to do their hair. Like just basic things that being willing to wanna, really being forced to learn and to embrace learning from others that don't look like me. And like I said, I feel like it's expanded my world in figuring out how to bring that together. I would say right now, it's when someone will say to me, well, have your boys met any African-American girls that they want to date? And I'm like, why would she have to be African-American? And so it's the little things that I think, I want us to live in a world where we can have all those conversations. I think that's something we try really hard as a church, is that we're willing to ask and to be humble and want to learn. And I think that's what's helped us navigate some things that could be difficult. And, my prayer is that we all can have that heart of leaning in to learn to embrace the beauty of the different cultures and what we can bring to each other's lives, because that's the kingdom and that's what eternity is going to look like.
Beautiful. What are you hoping to accomplish with this series concerning infertility? What do you want to happen?
I felt isolated in walking through it. There weren't a lot of resources at the time, and I want to inspire and encourage other people that are walking through it to trust that God's writing your story, and it doesn't need to look like mine. It doesn't need to look exactly like someone else's, but to embrace what your story is, and to expand the even ideas of what it could look like by sharing our stories. It does take stepping out in faith, for us, the financial resources that we needed to do an international adoption, and with 2, it's doubled.
Right.
And so it's recognizing those moments where God is saying, be tenacious, stand in faith. And when God's saying, let go of your plan, I've got a better one.
Okay.
And so I'm hoping people will be inspired by hearing different stories of how that's happened.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. This is a launch of something wonderful. And I hope you'll watch every one of these series because they're going to bring you hope. They're going to bring you joy. Kathleen Estes, thank you. Bless
Thank you, Pastor Randy.